What's going on, brothers? What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? We are in the house. We are in the house tonight. Woo! It's been over a week. It's been over a week. I see you. I see you, Barry Little. I see you, Tim Howard. What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? If you brothers can hear me, just drop a 1 in the chat. Drop a 1 in the chat. If you brothers can hear me, drop a 1 in the chat. I need to know that you can hear me loud and clear. What's up? What's up? What's up? What's up? What's up? What's up? There we go. There we go. There we go. What's going on? Muata, I see you, my brother. What's going on, BGS? What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Oh, it is Friday Night Live. It is Friday Night Live. It is January the 21st, 2022. What's going on, Ishmael Thomas? I see you, man. So glad that you're here. So glad that you're here. I see all of you guys. I see all of you guys. Oh, we're going to have a good conversation tonight. We're going to have a good conversation tonight. We're going to talk about black men. We're going to talk about black male studies, BMS. Hashtag BMS. Hashtag BMS. Y'all like the stream? Like the stream, brothers. Like the stream. Share the stream. If you are brand new, to this channel, subscribe. We are going to go deep tonight. Oh, I'm looking forward to this. My good friend, my colleague, my brother, Dr. T. Hasan Johnson is going to be here tonight. I've been waiting to do this for a long time, guys. I've been waiting to do this for a long time. It's been a long time coming, man. It's been a long time coming. And we're going to do it. We are going to do it. We're going to do it BMI style. We're going to do it BMA style. We're going to do it BME style. And we're most definitely going to do it BMH style. This is a black man's channel. This is a black man's channel. Thank you, Barry Little. Thank you, my brother. Thank you for that. That's right. You are starting it off right with that $10 super chat, my brother. We appreciate you. I am Miles. What's going on? What's going on? What's going on, brothers? What's going on? I see you, Alexis Moore. I see you, Iyongo Savage. I see you, Jamel Moore. I see all of you. I see you, Free Agent 97. I see you. I see you. I see you. I see you. Oh, yes, we are going to talk to one of the most prolific, productive. My God, he's got to be one of the most, if not the hardest working man in the black manosphere. Dr. T. Hasan Johnson. Y'all know what time it is. This is a conversation with Dr. J. Thank you, Tim Howard. Thank you, Tim Howard. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Dr. J is so gracious to so many of us using his platform, the Onyx Report and the Institute for Black Masculine Studies. And he is so gracious to invite so many of us to be a part of that enterprise. And he's given and given and given and given so much of himself. I've been on his platform so many times, and so I'm looking forward to having him here tonight. We are used to Dr. J being the interviewer. We are used to Dr. J being the one who moderates and facilitates. But we're going to give Dr. J a break. We're gonna switch it up just a little bit. Thank you for that, Tim Howard, my brother. It's gonna be good. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's right. We have all the acronyms in the house. What's going on, brother Brandon Penn? What's happening, man? Good to see you, mother Brandon Penn. Good to see you, my brother. We are back in the house. That's right, my brothers. BMA, BME, BMI, and BMH. That's what it's all about, guys. And you know, there's a lot that has been going on over the last couple of weeks. Since the last time I did a broadcast, guys, we have seen a great deal in the manosphere. I'm not going to talk about every detail of what's happening, but you already know. You all know that the Black manosphere has touched the mainstream. We know that with Kevin Samuels. We know that with him. But we know that with other content creators, it is touching the mainstream at higher levels. You have the mainstream, you have the gynocrats, you have the feminists. They are now responding to the Black manosphere. You've got for Harriet. She's doing videos and she's talking about the Black manosphere. And she's talking about Black men. And you can go on to Twitter, my brothers. Go on to Twitter. And I've been on Twitter over the last couple of weeks, and I've been following folks on Twitter. I have a Twitter account, which I do not use. I have a Twitter account that has been inactive for a couple of years. Well, not a couple of years. It's been inactive for a number of years. And I haven't used that purposely. Because when I was using Twitter, it was a very, very volatile place. I'll put it like that. And I lost my taste for using Twitter, so I left Twitter. What's going on, Infantry Skills? I see you, Mark Holt. I see you, my brothers. It's good that you're here and everything, my guy. But there's a lot of conversation that is going on right now. That we want to facilitate, guys, and take to a higher level. Y'all know what time it is. Hey, man, you all are very familiar with what has happened recently with one of the infamous, one of the venomous feminists of the millennial generation. I am not going to name her. But you all know who she is. And she wrote a piece recently for Vanity Fair on Dave Chappelle and a great number of African-American male personalities and entertainers. And she has reminded us once again of the necessity of our space and the imperative that is connected to the work that we do in this sphere right here, this Black man sphere that we call the Black manosphere. So we're going to talk about all those things as we go forward, my guys. As we go forward, be sure to share, be sure to like, be sure to subscribe. We've got 40 people in the chat. This is going to be an explosive conversation. I haven't done this on my channel before. I have not had Dr. Hasan Johnson here as a guest, and I am so happy that he is here. And he's going to give us his vision. He's going to tell us about his work. We're just going to have a conversation, guys. 2 Black scholars, 2 Black men, along with the rest of you guys. Thank you, Universal 178. Thank you, Universal 178. We are so glad that you are here, my guy. We are so glad that you are here. Thank you for the support. You guys, you can support this stream with the super chats, with the super sticker. You can support this stream Visa, Cash App, $BMI 3000, Cash App, $BMI 3000, PayPal, Ronald B. Neal, PayPal, Ronald B. Neal. My guys, thank you for that support. Thank you for that support. And we have been reminded once again as to why we are here. We are reminded in this milieu. We know that we are making an impact. We know that we are making a difference. We have created a public. We've created a public. And Dr. Johnson and I are going to talk about the public that we have created for Black men in the United States. And let me just say this, I want to be clear. This platform, we speak particularly to the issues, the concerns of Black men in the United States, but we are also sensitive and we are also aware of the issues related to other men outside of the United States. Other Black men, other Black brown men, okay, who are in different parts of the world, who are in the Caribbean, who are on the continent of Africa, those who are in South America, in Central America, those who are in Europe, various parts of Europe, Australia, New Zealand, you brothers who are in Asia, who are in China, who are in Japan, we are aware of you. We have a global sensibility, and we understand you. We see you. We see you. We see you. We see you. And we welcome you to this space right here. So I'm giving a shout out to all my international brothers who are here tonight. So I'm happy. So brothers, we are not going to waste too much time. We're not going to waste too much time because we want to be efficient with what we have in front of us. And so I'm not going to wait any longer. I'm not going to wait any longer. I'm going to bring in the honorable Dr. T. Hasan Johnson. What's going on, Doc?
What's up, man? How you doing?
I am doing well, man. I am doing well, man. Good to see you.
You as well, man. It's always an honor. Always,
man. It is my pleasure, man. And I am so happy, man, that you so gracious to accept the invitation, man, to come and to be a part of this conversation, man. I've been, like I was telling the brothers a minute ago, I've been thinking about this, and you and I talked about this at a cursory level, man. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and so here we are. And I want the brothers to know, all you guys who are out there, that Dr. Johnson, again, he's been gracious to me, and Dr. Johnson is, let me just say this, guys, Dr. Johnson is probably the main reason why I'm on YouTube.
Oh, wow.
The main reason why I'm on YouTube, I'm going to tell you guys this. I'm going to tell you guys this, and we'll talk a little bit about the history and everything. But I was, YouTube was something I thought about some years ago, and I never had taken it up and what have you, and just decided to just stay in my little Facebook world. I decided to stay in my little Facebook world and do Facebook and do my post, and some people call me a sniper and stuff, so I'll just snipe.
Nah, man, BGS and I had to come get you, man, because if we didn't come get him, he'd be in another country. He would have never got on YouTube. He might not ever come back to America. We had to get him. We had to get him first. We got to get you on the air before you leave, brother.
That's it. And I tell you, Dr. J, I remember when he had the vision to go on YouTube, and he shared that with me, and the vision of the Onyx support and everything, and he went ahead and made it happen. And a couple of years later, man, things change, and he's like, Doc, it's time for you to come on out here, Doc. When you gonna do it?
That's right. Yeah, wait.
Thank you, Sam C.
He was dropping too many bombs on Facebook just daily, just dropping bombs. And I kept having to ask him over and over again, can I share that? So finally he was like, you just need to get up here and tell people what's up, man. You just, killing it.
Man, I tell you. And let me tell you, and I'll be honest, guys, I had a little bit of anxiety about going on YouTube, and we'll talk about that, as academics, what it means to make this transition and get out here like this, treading brand new waters, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so, yeah. After getting over that, I made the leap, and Dr. J, and I would say this, guys, Dr. J was a major catalyst and inspiration and everything like that. You know what I mean? So iron sharpens iron. Black men inspire. And here's the thing about the fellowship and the brotherhood, right? Because we inspire each other. You know what I'm saying? We inspire each other. We help each other. I had anxiety, and I looked at him, and he did it, and I said, okay, well, Dr. J did it, man. I could do it. You know what I mean? And and jumped out there, man. And that's how the synergy works when we do this, guys. And that's why it's so important that we have this connection, and we have this brotherhood and this fellowship. That's why we do this. And even this work with Black masculinity, man. We can't do it in isolation, man. And we'll talk about that and how we hooked up together and everything. But let me just say, man, I'm saluting my brother right here, guys. I'm saluting my brother, showing him much love, much appreciation and everything. You guys don't know, how blessed and fortunate you guys are to have somebody with, like Dr. J, with his skills and proficiency with technology and everything, to be out there and to do what he does at his level. So shout out to Dr. J.
Amen.
And again, I'm glad, man, that you're in the house. And so guys, I need y'all to like, y'all share, y'all subscribe, y'all support. Thank you, Sam C, again. Thank you, brother, for that. We're gonna have a great conversation, man. We're gonna have a great conversation tonight, man. But let's kind of start right here, man. Man, a lot has been happening, man, within the last week or so. Conversations, man, about the Black manosphere and Black male studies. And, you were a part of that recent Twitter space this past weekend, with Torian and everything. And, talking about, the politics behind Black male studies and all of that. And I thought that was a great, conversation. Tommy Curry, and we'll talk about Tommy Curry tonight, man. Tommy Curry was a part of that. Hood Scholar was a part of it, and Javion Gilmore, who was with Tommy at the University of Edinburgh, he was also a part of that. And I recall, man, there were about if I'm not mistaken, man, it seemed like there were like 500 people. 500 people. Yeah, it was packed. There were like 500 people in that space. You know what I mean? And I was inspired by that. It was wonderful. It was a good thing to see, man. And it was obvious to me, man, that we are in a very, very interesting and different place, man. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And it's very different, man. Even like from 5 years ago. You know what I mean? This is 2022, but even 5 years ago, I mean, things were different. You know what I'm saying? And we're like in a, it's like Star Trek around here. You know what I mean? In terms of time and velocity and how things are moving and how the conversations are taking shape and everything, man. That Twitter space, there was a lot of, one of the catalysts was, this Jamila Lemieux thing that came out in Vanity Fair and everything. And you did something on that this week and everything, brother. So you want to, share with us, your thoughts about, what's going on like right now in the digital domain.
Man, it's a pregnant moment. There's a lot of possibility in terms of that. And I mean, not only for Black male studies, for the manosphere and the larger movement of Black men, because I think, Black male studies from the academy, the manosphere, these are two symptoms of a larger movement. This is what I believe. And I think this has been going on for a while, but it's just been building momentum. So I'm happy to see it reaching a point where Black men are outspoken. Black men are saying what's on their minds in intimate relationships in public and social media in the academy. The academy is a little further behind most, but we trying to push it. We trying to push it. So, that session on Twitter was key. Shout out to Torrin Walker who put that together. He told me about that. I said, man, I said I'm happy to join, and he said, yeah, Tommy's gonna be speaking. And as soon as I heard that, I said, man, I'll join in where I can, but I'm there to listen as well. Tommy's my brother. I enjoy checking him out, and you and I were we've been involved in those early conversations about hell, even before we developed the term Black male studies. You and I were in those discussions, talking that out with Tommy and a number of other brothers. So, for us to be kind of pushing from each of our different directions and seeing it advance, it lifts me, man. A lot of this last week has been in response to that Vanity Fair article. But it goes so much beyond that, it really does. So we just had to put that in context. But yeah, man, I'm really happy about the moment. I think there's a lot of potential in the academy. It's just going to take brothers to position themselves strategically and then be courageous enough to speak out. That's really what it's going to take. You were one of the few people that did that. You know what I mean? You, William Smith, Tommy, and myself. I remember when it was just, as far as being willing to speak out publicly. And
I remember that 2015 conference that you had at Fresno at your school, Fresno State. That we did, which was digital and everything. And a lot of those ideas were there, and it's still on YouTube, isn't it? Isn't that video? That video is still on YouTube. Where we talked about a lot of it, man. But what what I'm saying, man, this is just it's like a completely new thing that is happening, and the pressure. Like I said, man, I'm seeing the responses, at least in social media. I'm seeing these, the people who had, what Torian called the Guardian classes, those people who established, some of the women and what have you, the folks who were writing. You remember the folks who were writing from like Clutch magazine, and they were writing from The Root. So you remember how The Root in those publications and later in the Griot, how they were just, it was like an everyday assault on Black men. Okay.
Yeah.
They're not around anymore. The Root is gone. The Root has been, like the Black Root, it has been dismantled. It's no longer in existence. It got new management. The editors are gone and everything. You know what I mean? What? All that vitriol that we used to get is just, it's like they broke that thing. White people, the white liberals, just decided to go in a different direction.
I didn't even notice that the Root was gone until you said it.
That's the thing.
I just forgot about it.
Yeah. And
I'm
so
glad to hear.
Yes, me too. and so it's like we're in a moment now where even if it still, has some gravitas,
right?
It cannot withstand. It cannot withstand the kind of momentum that we have right now. That is that you got brothers all over Twitter, man. It's like when I follow Tommy and I saw this, and you put this on your Facebook page. You talk about this African American woman economist who put up that data set on I think the pandemic numbers, and she deliberately concealed the numbers on Black males, and she only foregrounded the numbers on Black women and everything in terms of the pandemic. And bro, I watched the responses to her. It was just a whole bunch of people just responding to her. Tommy, he was there responding to her, but there was a whole bunch of you got like a cadre of folks, all right, and like younger people who they're aware of what we're doing and everything. And I think some of them, they may have read the man now. They're following Tommy on Twitter and everything, and some of them showing up in some of our chats and all of that, and watching us from a distance and what have you.
Oh yeah.
And the pushback was serious. You know what I mean? Like you are hiding this information.
Oh, I'm so glad to see that it is, because it was blatant. I mean, it was blatant, and the way the chart was laid out, it wasn't like it wasn't available on the chart. It was right next to the data on Black women, and the situation with Black males was worse. And then they kind of, in the third column, if I remember correctly, they kind of combined both and just talked about the Black community. But because men's numbers were so much worse, you had to look at the cumulative numbers and say, well, who's actually the most vulnerable in the Black community? And she sidestepped all of that. And so I'm really glad to see that people are starting to push back and challenge that. And at the same time, I'm getting graduate students that are asking me to sit on their I think I've sat on like maybe 5 PhD panels in the last 4 years. I mean, it's just, brothers are reaching out asking for help, because, and you've experienced this, a lot of these brothers they're in programs where they're trying to deal with gender, they're trying to deal with Black men, but because they're dealing with gender, they have to have a feminist on their advisory board, and so they're trying to navigate, and they're getting a lot, and that's if they have one. Some of them have 2 or 3, and they're trying to navigate, and they're getting a lot of pushback, and often by the time they reach out to me, these brothers are on the verge of being pushed out of their programs because they're not willing to toe the line and just say what they're told to say. And so when we start giving them the ideological, the academic, the intellectual, the empirical data on how to respond, and then we're physically writing ourselves into their advisorship, it's causing a stir. It's like, what is this? There's a movement happening, and they don't like it. And the only way they've been able to frame it as a mass misogynist movement.
That's all.
But that's the problem when you come to the academics, and most particularly if you start with the man not. The data is so irrefutable. You can't just dismiss it as a misogynist movement. You actually have to deal with the argument, and people are willing to just ignore it as opposed to deal with it. We're seeing it.
Most definitely. And I will share with you, man, because I've had some inside information from folks who are in graduate programs, and some graduate students are really challenging these areas, and some of these women who are in these positions, these professors in positions to authorize dissertations and all that kind of stuff and everything like that. They're coming in with the language that we're using. Okay. And they don't know what to do with it. They don't because like, where's this coming? Because it's like we're not teaching this stuff in the classroom. Okay. And it's not happening anywhere. And these guys are coming in with these questions, and this analysis, and it's like, you have a feminist person or a womanist oriented person who's like, hold up, we ain't doing that. You know what I'm saying? So this thing is really real, man. But listen, man, let's talk about your work, man. I want to talk, tonight, and I know your time is precious, so we're not going to be here forever, man. But I mean, you have the Onyx Report, the Institute for Black Masculine Studies. When you and I met, you had the blog for New Black Masculinities, and you still have your blog and your website and everything. And and that's how I came to know your work and everything, and how we hooked up through Tommy Curry, Facebook, and everything. And started our friendship, relationship, brotherhood from there, man. And I know you've been very vocal, while you've been on YouTube about, your background and the origins and all of that. And I'm digging into some of that. I don't want to go too deep into it, man, but I want for the audience, for the brothers, and whoever else is listening, man, talk a little bit about, man, what inspired you. Let's start, with you are at Fresno and in working through these kind of questions with Black masculinity, after having been trained primarily, with feminist orientations and having gone to temple and all of that, you know what I mean? And not having, here's the thing, we find ourselves having to create something that never existed. Okay. And
Exactly.
so talk a little bit about that whole process and maybe the struggle, when you decided to make that step to like do this work and enter into this field that basically is unprecedented.
Man, it's been a long, slow road. I mean, like you said, I went to Temple in 96 to 97, did my master's there, took a couple of years off to strategize, got married, and then decided to go to Claremont in cultural studies. And while I was there, I basically created my own interpretation of cultural studies that was basically Black cultural studies. And I brought in some older Black scholars that were there. And so I had a Marxist on my committee. I had a feminist who was an Black Panther on my committee. I kind of pulled that together. And yeah, by the time I graduated, I was trained in Black feminism. But as you know, we got Black feminism in classes that weren't, marked out as gender courses. If you were taking a lit class, if it was taught by a feminist, you got feminist gender theory. So I went through a whole bunch of that. And it wasn't until I got to Fresno, and what I think I got there in like '08. And I taught there for a couple of years before I even started to deal with masculinity. I was always dealing with Black male studies, or just the issues of Black men. I was dealing with it from other vantage points without really being conscious of it. When I got to Fresno, one of the reasons they hired me is to teach hip hop, which was something I was doing in graduate school. So, that was the kind of starting point. And of course, I needed to publish. So my first book, I decided to write something that would be a little more useful for me teaching hip hop, that would allow me to talk about hip hop the way I wanted to. And here was when I ran into the wall. I had to have a gender component. And so I talked about Black women and I talked about Black men. I had I ended up with 2 chapters on Black women. It's a very short book. I mean, I wrote it right, like literally a couple months after my wife died. So I was just, I was just trying to get this thing done. But I noticed I had so when I finished it, they send me the box, and for the first time, it's the thing you've experienced this. You open the box and you see a book that's printed with your words in it, and it's just a mind blowing experience, right? So I'm sitting there reading through it, and I look toward the end, and I see 2 chapters on Black women, and then I had a section on Black men that maybe was like a page and a half. One thing to see a word on your computer, it's another thing to see it printed, and you realize, or I realized, I didn't know how to talk about Black men in any way other than how feminism taught me to. And the best I could do was remove as much of the feminist rhetoric as I could, and what was left was a page. That's when I realized there's something going on here that I got to get better at, because it doesn't make sense. Because with Black feminism, all you learn is to talk about Black males as Black females' problem. They're the cause of abuse. They're the cause of divorce. They're the cause of unhappiness and discord. They're the cause of undermining of Black political movements. All of these kind of narratives. So I managed to remove that, but I noticed I didn't have anything else to say, other than that. So what I decided to do was I wanted to do something with Black males on the campus. And so I decided that I would do it. So anyway, I'll start it this way. I was bringing in hip hop artists, classic hip hop artists to the campus. I was bringing KRS-One. I was bringing Brother J from X Clan. I was bringing Cool OD. So I was bringing these classic artists. Yeah, man. I brought Chuck D from Public Enemy, and most of those are on YouTube. I brought them to the campus and he spoke and did these different things. I had KRS-One on campus and he performed. And campus, they were terrified about a hip hop concert on campus. They tried to shut it down because I had brothers driving in from the Bay. They were coming from Arizona. They were just to see him perform. And I remember the campus was afraid there was going to be a shootout. And I was like, y'all have any idea who KRS-One is? There's not about to be a shootout with KRS-One. You know what I mean? But they didn't. And at the same time, they were saying that they were having trouble recruiting Black males. And I said, look, I have 600 Black males coming to this campus to see KRS-One. We could set up a booth, recruit people right there. They didn't want to have nothing to do with it. So, it started to frustrate me. And when I had Brother J from X Clan, he actually stayed at my house for a couple days after he was done. And so I had some students come over and we were watching Diary of a Tired Black Man. And so Brother Jay, a couple of students, we're all sitting there talking, and I'm listening to these two students. They're first years, and they're sitting on my floor and they're talking. Brother Jay and I are talking. When I start listening to what they're talking about, what they were talking about were the sexual expectations women had of them in bed. And what they were saying was they had young women who were asking them to role play rape scenes. They were being asked to do this. So they were sharing techniques and talking about experiences. And as I was sitting there looking at them, I said, "Oh shit!" I said, "Y'all gonna get locked up before you even know what's going on," because they didn't have an awareness of how vulnerable they were making themselves in this performance. And what women were able to do with these kind of things. So I said, "You know what? I'm gonna set up a class." And I'm going to start to explore this stuff. And this is before I met Tommy. This is before I met you. I just said, I'm going to start a class and I'm going to try and get into this a little more. And I said, at the same time, I realized a lot of these brothers probably aren't going to take the class. No, it was actually the other way around. Excuse me. I was going to start an organization for Black males on the campus. And I said, the problem with that, though, is that I know I won't be able to get those guys to read the way I want them to. So I'm going to set up this organization, and then I'm also going to set up a class. And I did both. So I created we ended up calling it the Onyx Black Male Program, or Black Male Collective. We called it the Onyx Black Male Collective. And then I also set up a class, the Black Male Experience. And, now I'm starting out teaching it as a feminist. I'm noticing that young women are taking the class in droves to watch me finger wag in to tell them how bad they are. And as a trained feminist, I was just doing what I was trained to do, and I noticed they were loving it. My Black males were quiet, and there were fewer and fewer of them taking the class, and I was like, "What the hell is going on?" And when I started to actually pull back and say, "You know what? I'm going to let these brothers' conversation start to direct what we talk about," because I was using Mark Anthony Neal's book, New Black Man, and
I got you.
So when I started to kind of turn it around and I started to kind of actually let them lead the conversation in the course, and then started to actually defend what they were saying and find the merit in it, I noticed a swift change over the course of 2 years. Black women started taking the class less. More Black males started taking the class. And then we started to have women of other orientations who were coming in to take the class. It was a weird kind of switch. And I would show them Diary of a Tired Black Man. We would watch that film in class. And I remember one seminal year. Well, there was two things that really kicked off this entire experience. One seminal year, I was showing that film, and one of the Black women in class said, "That film is bullshit." She said, "I don't know any Black women that act like that." And one of the quietest brothers in the class slowly raised his hand and he said, "Well, my cousin acts like that." And another one raised his hand. He said, "Well, that's my sister." And another one said, "Well, yeah, that's both my aunt and my mother." And all the women got quieter and quieter because the men who weren't used to speaking were finally saying, "No, we've seen that in our families. That's my girlfriend. That's my ex-girlfriend. That's," and that was a moment where I started to see them finding their voice. The other experience was the very first class I taught for Black male studies. The very first day, before I even walked in the room, there was a police officer, a detective, and a military recruiter standing at the door waiting for me. So this is like 9:30 in the morning. The very first class. I haven't even seen who's taking the class yet. I haven't even opened the door to see how many students I have, and they're both waiting. The detective wants me to point somebody out that he wants to arrest for a liquor store robbery, and the recruiter wants to, before I even teach, he wants to come give a presentation to convince Black males to leave college and join the military. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? So that's when I started to realize this is really something we have to delve into. The way the blog started is I made it an assignment in my class that they had to interview a Black male over 40. They had to do an oral interview about his life. And I put it up in the blog for people to see. And I did this for a couple of years. And what I would get is these hate letters from women who knew the men being interviewed.
Oh wow.
And we're talking about ex-wives, ex-girlfriends, who were writing to say, take him off that website. He doesn't deserve to be praised. He ain't this, he ain't that. And the funny thing is, it wasn't even about praise. It was just an interview about his life, where he was from, what he did, what was his career, what were his experience in life. It wasn't that he was being honored. Those men were just being interviewed. And I started getting these letters from women that were so angry that anybody would bother to pay them any attention. So that's how the blog started. And I didn't even write anything until Heavy D passed.
Okay.
When Heavy D passed away, there was something about Heavy D that I always liked. The way he carried himself as a man, the integrity in his music, the consistency. And even when I would read about how he would bring his boys in and make sure they were okay, but they had to carry themselves a certain way. I honored that brother. And so when he passed, I wrote my first piece, trying to get a sense of Black male studies. And believe it or not, at that time, I even had Brittany Cooper, who supported what I was doing.
Oh, wow. Is that right? Wow.
Oh, yeah, man. I started doing film reviews, and I think when she stopped supporting me, it was right around when I did a review of 12 Years a Slave. But I was because like you said, we didn't have any models for this that we knew of. I mean, there was the Robert Staples, and there was, there were these brothers that had been doing these things at other times, but we weren't really introduced to them as Black male studies scholars. Ishmael Reed, we knew who they were, but many of us hadn't conceptualized what they were doing as part of a continuum, a larger conversation. So we didn't have models for this. So I'm trying to figure this stuff out. And I'm noticing the same tropes in media, and I'm starting to call it out more and more. And I'm noticing the audience that's starting to respond, and it's fewer and fewer women, and it's more and more men, and it's starting to shift over in that way. And then I start pushing the boundaries and really just kind of letting myself explore the ideas on the blog the way I want to explore them. I decided from there, you know what I'll do with this? I will use it as a space to not only write articles, but post data. Citation references that are going to be difficult for Black men to find in other places. And I'm going to leave them up there. And so I was doing it for graduate students, and this started to happen. Black graduate students started reading the blog, and they started using the citations for their own work. And that was kind of how that started. And that's around the time I met you. I met Tommy, and then Tommy introduced me to you and a number of other brothers in that unit, and we started to connect. But you always had a very independent, creative way of looking at things. And I was always drawn to how passionate you were, how brilliant you were. And, to be honest with you, when your mother passed, that was when I was like, you know what, you got a brother over here in California. And if you ever come to California and you don't come to my table, I got a plate waiting for you. We're going to have a problem. If you don't make it to California, if you come to California, I don't see you. Man, you got a brother, and I mean that. I'm like, you better come sit here and eat, brother. I got you. And that's what
listen, man. Yeah. And let me ask you this, man. When you went in that different direction, like with that piece on 12 Years a Slave, and you start going, did you feel? What was that like? Was that like was it a freeing moment? Did you feel anxious? Did you feel like you were going somewhere, just unfamiliar? I mean, what was that like? You know what I mean? But in light of all the training that we have and accessibility, you know what I mean? When we've been taught, and we're gonna get to the language. We've been taught to be these CompuServes, and we've been taught to serve, and we've been taught to defer and all this kind of stuff, and to defend and protect and everything like that, and to see them as queens and goddesses and stuff like that.
Yes.
When you were shifting and when you were like breaking out, man, what was that? I mean, what was that feeling like? What was that?
I felt like I was betraying my mother. And I mean that literally and figuratively, because, and this is something that I think happened with people like Mark Anthony Neal. Many of us, when we went to school, we went to graduate school, we came under the wing of a Black woman at some point. Now, my primary mentor in undergrad was Dr. William Little. at Cal State Dominguez. He was also the president of the National Council for Black Studies. So that was my primary mentor until he passed away. But in graduate school, my mentor was a Black feminist at the Claremont colleges. And, you end up kind of developing almost a mother-son dynamic, right? And so when I'm learning Black feminism, right, because this was the only place I could really deal with Africana studies in graduate school, because I'm in cultural studies, and cultural studies is its own thing coming out of Britain, and they don't deal with race the way I was comfortable with. So I'm, using these Africana studies scholars, and she's bringing in a heavy amount of Black feminism, which I had been introduced to, but I hadn't really studied under somebody with. So when she started to bring that in, I'm taking it in, and we developed a good relationship outside of class. I mean, she was at my wife's funeral. I mean, this became a mother-son kind of dynamic, but it wasn't until after I graduated where I realized how much wasn't being told. That's the thing that bothered me. The first thing that really blew my mind was incarceration. I'd always seen the stats on percentages of Black men and women incarcerated. I never actually looked up the raw numbers. And this was around the time I met Tommy. I don't think I got it from him, but this was why empiricism really began to appeal to me, because I came out of a structuralist kind of program where empiricism was frowned on. Empiricism was white men and so on. When I raw numbers, at that time, you had almost 900,000 Black men incarcerated and about 65,000 Black women. And I was like, wait a minute. For years, I've been hearing Black men and women are incarcerated in high numbers, the Black community, and it was feminists that were seeing this. They had never shown the raw numbers. They always played with the percentages, you know what I mean? And right around that time, they were saying, well, I think it was something like 1,500. There was a 1,500% increase in Black women's incarceration. So I'm like, wow, what's going on? What's going through it? And I looked at the raw numbers one day, and I'm like, nearly 900,000 brothers and 65,000 Black women. Wait a minute, what the? You know what I mean? I went through a kind of academic red pill rage. Because I started finding issue after issue after issue that was not being represented accurately. And I started raising these questions, and the problem was I didn't have anyone I could bring them to. All my colleagues were feminists. You know what I mean? And so when you raise those questions, people either argued with you or they just gave you a blank look. And so, to be honest with you, when I wrote that Heavy D piece, it was really my way of planting a flag, and I didn't even know what for. I was planting a flag, and the more raw I got, the more I was saying, I don't know who else is out here. Maybe I'm just alone, but I'm gonna plant this flag, and I'm hoping I can find other people. And not long after that, Tommy reached out to me, and strangely enough, on the Manosphere side, Obsidian reached out to me. So here I'm starting to draw on two different spaces where Black men are starting to speak up on wholly different terms. But it was still, I knew it was something, it was still part of a larger movement of Black men coming to terms. And the thing is, we outside of hip hop, we really never had a space. And I wouldn't say we control hip hop, because a lot of record companies had a lot of control over what we could do. So it took social media for us to be able to speak freely. And that really opened up the door. So now I'm feeding in from a small collective of Black men in the academy and a small collective of Black men on social media. And we're starting to figure out what it is we're really trying to say. And that really blew my mind. And it started to expand, and so I'm having conversations with you and Tommy and a number of the other brothers, Brian. And I'm also on the YouTube side, I was drawn to BGS. And BGS, the reason I was drawn to BGS is we're having these conversations about women. It's important. But BGS was talking about race. He was talking about politics. He was talking about structural issues. And that was very much in line with what I was interested in on both sides of the academic line. So it really, from there, I was able to kind of start building up and asking new questions. And at that time, I would just show up in BGS's Coliseum, and he would interview me, a little bit. And then he started to push me. He started to push me. He said, you should do a show. And like you, I'm like, man, I ain't doing no damn shit. I got classes to teach. I got a child to raise. I don't know anything about boys not having a mother. I know about boys not having a father. So I'm trying to raise my son, and he's talking about doing a show, and I'm like, man, I'm not really, feeling it. But he also, and he and I talked about this. He also noticed that I was kind of burning out on just what I was teaching. Because it was very consistent with what I'd learned in Africana studies, but my passion was not there anymore. I wanted to deal with Black men, and there wasn't a space for it really. So he kind of pressured me, and he got me on Interlight Radio, a Black-owned radio station. So I started doing shows. I started trying to learn how to manage a show. And as our experience managing a classroom, it's not the same, but there are skills you kind of bring. What really pushed me though is he would read some of my blog articles.
Okay.
So I would write these blogs that maybe 300 people would read. And that was great. And then, but BGS would say, okay. And he'd do a show where he did nothing else but just read my blog. 5,000 people would like it. And I'd be like,
that's it.
He wouldn't even say nothing. He just kind of looked at me like, what you gonna do, Doc? So he kind of ended up pushing me there.
I remember it.
Yeah, man, and that's how it, because you get to this point where it's like, and I'm still here in many respects. In the academy, I only have a small collective of brothers I can turn to, and dialogue with, who are honest and real. And to be honest, there's been a couple of brothers, cats who aren't even Black, that have taken to what we're talking about. And are starting to ask those questions in their own culture. You know what I mean? So I got, some Asians, some Latino cats, even a couple of white cats that'll call me and tell me about things going on in their communities that are mirroring this. So, it really has kind of grown for me. And that eventually led to, the Institute for Black Male Studies and so on and so forth, just that whole process. But it was a slow, snowball, slowly growing.
Yeah. Now you and I, we had a couple of weeks back, we had a long Friday night with Green Gorilla, and we talked about Black nationalism and the question of what happened to Black nationalism and everything like that. And you have a background, an interesting background in Black nationalism, and you've done shows on Black nationalism and everything. Remember, maybe it might have been 6 months ago, he did the Velvet, the Velvet painting. Remember that? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, man. Yeah, man.
So on one hand, and I want to kind of go back when you were talking about, you had this kind of like red pill moment when you were looking at all this data, and the data forced you to make an epistemological shift. You know what I'm saying? It's just, we're talking about just a major shift, paradigm shift in your thinking, with reference to all the stuff that, they had been, learned and had absorbed from feminist ideology and all that kind of stuff. But then there's the other part of it. There's also the Black nationalist side as well. And you're in Africana studies and everything. And there's something else there to be said on the other side in terms of Black nationalism and Black men and even Black women, man. So then was that? I mean, how did that play? How did that come out in terms of the processing and shifting?
Yeah, that was rough. I mean, I think you and I we came out the same era. So as a teenager, I remember wearing the X caps for the Malcolm X movie. Malcolm X was the book, the autobiography that opened me up, that really, had me looking at nationalism. I read that at 16. That changed my whole worldview. I go into undergrad and graduate with a degree in Africana studies. So nationalism is so mixed in to everything I'm doing. And my mentor, when it came time to go to graduate school, I wasn't thinking about graduate school. I didn't even really know what it entailed, what it was. I was going to graduate and go work at UPS. And my mentor called me to his office and he said, "Well, you about to graduate. What you gonna do?" Um, I got 2 majors in Africana Studies and philosophy, not because I had a plan. I just took a bunch of classes that I enjoyed. Next thing I knew, I had a degree, in philosophy and Africana Studies. And so he was like, "Well, what are you gonna do?" I said, I'm gonna go get a job." He said, "Where?" I said, "Well, UPS." And he was like, "Mm-mm." Picked up the phone, made a call. And a couple months later, I'm standing in Philadelphia with 2 suitcases trying to figure out how to get to the Temple campus. And, I'm staying in this underground basement dorm room, uh, and I'm taking classes in African American studies under Malefi Asante. So nationalism, Afrocentricity, all of that is mixed in there. And the way the program was structured, all of the women, or I would say the overwhelming majority, would go over to women's studies and they would take classes with Sonia Sanchez. So Sonia Sanchez in women's studies would, through lit, would kind of bring them through, and they would come back to Africana studies or African American studies with this kind of feminist outlook. I didn't, I had a few classes in undergrad on, but I was like, okay, it's almost like it's kind of like a religion with them, but they come in with this. And I did my classes. I finished early, mainly because I was so isolated in Philly. I didn't know anybody, didn't have many friends and family. I'm not the fastest person to make friends. I'm a bit introverted, so I just took as many classes as possible and finished in a year, almost a year to the day. And ended up taking a couple years off after that. But nationalism was such a part of everything I'd learned. I never questioned it. I just assumed my job was to come in here and help build the Black community via the academy. And I kind of carried that all the way up through Fresno. And one thing that kind of got me was when I started to realize that some of these these mentors, these feminist mentors that I had, they were either withholding information or they were purposely avoiding it and overlooking it altogether. And I started to look at this and say, wow, you actually have people that I thought were about uplifting the Black community who were really about uplifting Black women. And when I started to look at every campus I had been to, they were, as far as the Black population, they were overwhelmingly female. And many of the what is it? So you had faculty, you had staff, you had administration. The majority of the Black faculty, staff, and administration were women. And when it came to recruiting students, they were, they would kind of push to bring in more women. When it came to supporting students on campus, they would push, except for key individuals, they would push to recruit and retain more women. And I just kind of look at this. And now all of a sudden I'm a faculty person and I'm being asked to help set up programs to recruit Black students. And the program, and so it's me and 3 or 4 other Black females. And I'm noticing that all the students that we're recruiting are only women. And the guys are dropping out left and right, and there's no kind of support. So that red pilled me in a sense too. I mean, so at the same time that I'm finding out there's a wealth of information about Black men that's being sidestepped and swept under the table, like that Twitter woman you talked about earlier with the chart. Every time I'm finding that out, I'm seeing the administrative side where the women I'm working with that I thought were just as nationalist as I were sidestepping Black men. And so I'm being kind of red pilled in multiple spaces at the same time. And I'm saying, wait a minute, what the hell is going on? I thought we were family, and I'm being told, no, you just got to keep doing what you're doing, uplift the Black community. And I'm like, but y'all ain't doing that.
Yeah, they do it.
Y'all are specific about helping only Black women. And then I'm sitting in movies, you know what I mean? And I'm starting to see all of these feminist impulses that are coming in and shaping these kind of discussions. So the thing, for example, when I did the piece on 12 Years a Slave, one of the scenes that really blew me out of the water, here's the story of a man who's kidnapped, drug into slavery, even though he was free and had a wife and kids and was, had an occupation. He's forced into 12 years of actual slavery. And when he finally gets out and gets home, he apologizes to his wife. And there was something about that that really fucking hurt. I was like, wait a minute, there was no acknowledgement that this was not something he controlled. There was no acknowledgement of his experience. And I didn't know if that was the actual story or the way they chose to do it in the film, but I was literally livid sitting here watching this movie where he has to apologize for that.
Yeah.
So there are all these little media moments where I'm like, what the hell is going on? I'm seeing these bits and pieces, and I just decided to start writing about it. And you had a number of people that would either ignore me or the occasional brother that would say, I never thought of that. But it was still a very slow process, but the nationalism part of it became harder and harder to implement. And then you get to 2014, 2015, you get to especially the death of Michael Brown, and you start to see this movement starting to happen in Ferguson, right? And you see people going to Ferguson, they're starting to rally, and I couldn't go. But as I'm watching it, I'm seeing scores and scores of educated Black women on Twitter. And I'm like, what exactly is going on with this? And then, we started to see the rise of BLM. And it took Darren Seals, to really kind of confirm for me that some of the things I was saying was actually happening on the ground, because I couldn't be there. So I'm guessing, I'm just looking at news clips and I'm like, this is looking real suspect. And then it took Darren Seals to say, no, this is what's happening. And I was like, okay, I'm not crazy. And that was the benefit of meeting you. It was like, I'm not crazy. This shit is happening.
That's right.
Because everybody around me is acting like I'm making some shit up. And I'm like, what is going on? You know what I mean? But I'm getting these reinforcements. So, and this is going to sound strange, but from Darren Seal to Patrice O'Neal. So Patrice is coming in talking about relationships and what men are experiencing. And I'm like, wait a minute, he's right. So I'm hearing it from these different places, but I hadn't put it all together yet, and I was trying to. So that's kind of one of the things that's really been, kind of I was struggling with. And I never completely did away with nationalism, but I did recognize there were other issues that nationalism wasn't going to address. And especially allow for a dialogue about in the way I wanted to have it. I wanted to bring out certain things that weren't part of the nationalist discourse. But they were happening on the ground, and Black men were rumbling about it in multiple spaces, disconnected spaces. That's what let me know this was a larger movement. It wasn't like there was a conversation happening between this space, this space, this space. It was happening at the same time. Different brothers with different sensibilities who had not been in dialogue with each other. You know what I mean? You couldn't point to Patrice O'Neal and talk about the manosphere. He was pre-manosphere. You know what I mean? He wasn't connected to the academics that I'm starting to pull from. He was, but he was an example of this kind of thing that was so new, and yet it was tied to some old stuff. I mean, you could really take it back to pimps in the 70s that were talking about things that we talk about now, but we never drew those strings together, really. You know what I mean? You can listen to certain artists and comedians, writers and filmmakers and scholars, but they were random and disconnected. So you didn't pull Robert Staples and tie him to Richard Pryor and tie him to Eddie Murphy and Chris Rock. That wasn't happening. It was just, you just had to figure out what this thing was. And that's what was driving me. What is this thing that I'm drawn to that nobody else is willing to explain? So, yeah.
So what has, because you have been driven in your work by data, you and Tommy, and you guys do it more than I do it, and way more than I do it, but you guys are driven by the data. And now it goes back to your first time venturing into prison numbers and everything. And then you went from prison numbers into domestic violence numbers, domestic violence numbers into sexual violence, RAPE numbers, and everything like that. I don't know of anybody, I can't think of anybody in Africana studies or anybody in African American studies, all right, or anything in the academy dealing with anything, under the rubric of Black or African American as a scholar who is driven, who is not in a economics department or in some quantitative area. You know what I'm saying? I can't think of anybody who's doing that in the area, with the exception of you and Tommy. Okay, Tommy's in Scotland, and you're right here, man. Man, can you speak to this in this kind of dilemma? I mean, in terms of how about this? In terms of where where we're going with Black men studies and everything like that, because it seems as though is that you've got the feminists, they're in the Africana studies part, and you might have some of these lingering nationalists or whatever, and even Afrocentrists or whatever. I was reading earlier before coming together, I was reading this, Malefi Asante's book from 2006, man. He's going in on Patricia Hill Collins in this chapter right here. Yeah, man. So he has an interesting critique of Patricia Hill Collins in this book, where he calls her basically a self-serving individualist. Because she was so staunchly anti Afrocentrism and everything like that, and Black, and she was anti-nationalist, Black male nationalists and everything like that. And so you got people like that, who've shaped, what we call right now is, Africana studies and Black nationalism and everything like that. And we had an interesting conversation, online about a faculty member who was at a university in California who left, who was a part of an Africana studies program where you had, overrepresentation of women, and very few men. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, can you speak to that? Being now that data is the thing. Data has facilitated a critique of feminist ideology. It has also facilitated a critique of Black nationalism, and it has exposed the shortcomings of both of these paradigms, man, that have shaped intellectual life over the last 50 years, man. Can you speak to that?
Well, I didn't have that kind of relationship with data until, after I was already tenure track. I was at Fresno and I was a couple of years in. I wasn't trained with an appreciation for data. I mean, coming out of Africana studies was very, it was humanities based, literature based. I had a slightly different angle kind of coming at it philosophically a little bit. But I was taught to avoid data. I was taught it was distrustful. It was kind of low key associated with white supremacy because we didn't control any of the agencies that were able to do these studies. So my whole attitude about data was that it was irrelevant until I saw those prison numbers for the first time. That's what converted me. That's what told me there is a sense of scale that you need. And whether you like data or not, whether it's problematic or not, that was really the only place you could get it, as far as what the numbers were telling us about a variety of things. So I started to lean into it more, but it wasn't my training. And that's around the time I met you, a couple of brothers in there, who were trained in that, and Tommy being one of them, was very comfortable with data. And so, as we would share charts. We would share charts and I'm just looking at this like, oh my God, the well gets deeper and deeper. The rabbit hole gets deeper and deeper. And the next thing I know, we're having conversations about bidirectionality in terms of influence. The same mind blow I had about the prison numbers I had when I found out that men and women in the Black community abuse each other at virtually the same rates. And I'm posting this data in Facebook discussions and debates with other PhDs who are calling me a misogynist for pointing it out. And when I put up the charts, they dismiss it, sidestep it, and continue arguing that Black men abuse more. And I'm like, well, this is, if you can't adhere to any kind of data, then we're really not talking about truth. We're talking about religion. We're talking about indoctrination, but data really, in that respect, I gained a serious appreciation for empiricism Because of that. And I noticed that I saw the same kinds of things happening in the manosphere. I saw brothers that were referencing reports and referencing articles, and I was like, huh. Because when I look at the Black feminists go back and forth, they wouldn't often do that. They would just have this kind of echo chamber where they just reinforce each other's experiences and feelings. But these brothers, many of whom were unlettered, they didn't have any degrees, but they're pulling in reports, they're pulling in articles and videos, and I'm saying they're backing their argument with something. And I hadn't seen that. And at the same time, in the academic sphere, I'm getting this information. So it all kind of melded for me in a particular way where it kind of helped me understand there was an importance to this because it gave us a barometer or a rubric that we had to refer to. So I couldn't just go off and talk about an experience I had with a woman I was dating and then, extrapolate that to all women. I had to go back to something rooted in analysis, rooted in a study, rooted in something beyond just myself. And that kind of really helped me get a handle on things and really give me a sense of what Black men were dealing with beyond stereotype, beyond conjecture. Because so many people seem not only invested in talking down about Black men, but they were rewarded for doing it. I mean, you and I have both climbed the academic and administrative ladder on campuses on the backs of Black men and boys, even if we're not even fucking there. Excuse my language. We're not there. They're still able to climb because of the way they talk about us. And once I started to really begin to look at that, it changed my whole world outlook. And I even noticed in terms of the women on my campus, they took a very different stance to me because students tell them about the stuff I'm talking about in class and and the citations and the data that I'm putting out, and they didn't like it. They were uncomfortable with it. They didn't know what to do with it. And by the time, and I'm working with these young men on campus, so they're going to their classes, bringing the data that I'm talking about, and it's starting to create a rumble. And they don't like it, but at the same time, they couldn't disprove it.
Most definitely. You've created. And you've been creating, and all of us, man, we, and you've said this, over the years on your platform, man, that, we're creating a language, this is the first time where Black men are creating a language that helps capture their experience. It's like, you're going through something that is problematic. Know that it reflects a disparity. It reflects a deep inequality. All right. It's violent. It's harmful. Okay. But you don't have the verbiage. You don't have the vocabulary. To articulate it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
One thing I have to the credit the women. Women tend to be, verbally adept. You know what I'm saying? They tend to know how to, and maybe it's because they're women and they're not as physical as us, and so they have to maximize other faculties. You know what I mean? So they have when you listen, I'll give you an example, man. I call it verbal diarrhea. I wasn't the first one. I didn't make that, but you listen to people, you listen to some of these feminists, man, the way they talk. I mean, they can get so sophisticated in terms of, the language. I mean, think about the intersectionality. You know what I'm saying? And what was going through Crenshaw's head when she decided to use this language. You know what I mean? To capture what she regarded as, this multi-dimensional thing that Black women were going through. You know what I mean? Right. They got so many other terms, you know what I mean? And so I give them credit for being, creative and adept with the use of language. But we are just in a place now, man, where we're creating language and concepts and terms and everything. And you have this working vocabulary that's growing. And there are two terms and that I want you all to talk about. I want you to talk about that you've created. And one, you talked about this the other night when you did that response to that Psychology Today piece on Black women. It was on on a woman. She wrote this piece on Black women being single and that they're not disturbed by it. You know what I mean? I just read it as a Black woman giving Black women comfort food. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So they don't have to worry about the fact that they are alone and they don't want to be alone. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. But do not have the skill to negotiate a relationship with a man. So yeah.
Oh my God. So you talked about the gynopedestal. It's the gynopedestal, and then I guess related to that would be you've got the concuserve, and then you tie them all to gynarchy, man. So if you would kind of like talk about you coming up and thinking about this language, man, the gynopedestal, the concuserve, and this relationship to the gynarchy, man. You can however order you want to deal with it, man. However it came to you, man.
Oh man.
I think it's important in terms of language and doing that, capturing experience.
Yeah. Well, okay. Then to do that, I have to start with this. I wrote a book around the time I met you. I wrote it in about 2014, 2015. No, 2015, I think, because I took a sabbatical. And in that sabbatical, I literally wrote for 18 hours a day, sometimes 21. I would literally, I'd get up from my bedroom, come straight to the office, and just write. Matter of fact, I saw Tommy at a conference when I met him in person for the first time. He came and took a nap in my hotel room, between sessions, and I'm sitting there working on this book. I finished the book, but I never published it. Right now, in that book, one of the things I started to talk about was this idea of the gynarchy, and I wrote a whole chapter. And I would say halfway through the chapter, BGS starts doing a video on what he called the gynocracy. And I'm just like, whoa. So I called it gynarchy because I didn't want to intrude on what he was doing, and I was trying to craft out this thing that I'm observing that goes back historically, but we don't ever talk about in the Black community. You know what I mean? We don't ever talk about, especially in the 1970s, where all of a sudden Big Mama becomes the head of the family. And in a way, Big Papa, her husband, dies early and leaves her house. But we don't talk about men, that generation of men. And so I'm observing this. And at the same time, now I can't talk about this in the academy because, for the most part, even at National Council for Black Studies conferences, nobody would come to the sessions on men. So I would be presenting this stuff and nobody would come. And I couldn't dialogue. But here I am in the manosphere, and I'm talking to brothers that are crafting their own language for it. So, BGS and I are talking about this. Other brothers are chiming in. The Coliseum is dealing with it, and we're tying our experiences in with it, And I started to describe it as a faux female-led patriarchy. It's really, and I call it a faux patriarchy because it's really sustained by the state. It's not a naturally occurring thing that's developed out of African American culture. It's sustained outside the culture, and that's how it functions. And so the definitions and the practices start to converge for me on how this begins to work. And so as I'm, so a couple of years later, when it comes to gynopedestal, right? The first observation I made of it, I actually went on it's one of those dates from a dating app. And so the woman gets there, and I quickly decide that's not something I want to pursue. But she was there at a restaurant, and I couldn't leave. She catfished me. She catfished me, man. I was just like, oh man, I didn't want to be rude, just get up and walk away. So we started talking. At least I was like, well, at least I'll have this conversation. And so we're talking and everything, and she starts to tell me about her family here in Fresno. She's head of her household. She's divorced. She's got a couple kids. Her mother lives a couple doors down, has a couple of kids, and grandkids and so on. Her sister lives right around the corner. She has a couple kids. None of them have men. None of them have husbands. The ones that did are divorced. The ones that had boyfriends had kids, got rid of the boyfriends. So I'm starting to see this, and then I started thinking about my own family, and then I started thinking about well some of my boys' families, and I was like, wait. This is more than just a lot of people getting divorces. I mean, we talked about it a few years ago, strictly in terms of the number of women initiating divorces. 1 out of 2 marriages end in divorce. 70-80% of the divorces are initiated by women, and all of that is relevant. But in the Black community, I'm noticing we talk about the single parent household, but we didn't really talk about how it was connected to other single parents. I mean, so from the grandmother who's single parent led to all her daughters who are single parent led, and they have sons, and those sons are trained to serve women, but they're not trained to be fathers or husbands. So they had relationships and contributed kids to another woman's single household. And these women are in constant dialogue with each other. They're exchanging resources, and one of the resources they're exchanging are men, sons, ex-boyfriends. That Psychology Today article I talked about in my last show. She talks about her ex-boyfriends are resources for her. My car broke down. There's a hole in the wall I need fixed. The door doesn't open. She's calling ex-boyfriends, her mama's ex-boyfriends, her sister's boyfriend. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, there's a structure to this that I didn't realize was happening. And the more I started to study it, the more I saw it having, weight in the real world. When I started saying, well, if we look at not just the single parent household, but how these Black women-led single parent households are in connection with each other, one of the first terms I looked up, of course, began with matriarchy. I ran across this term, matripotestal. Matripotestal family structure. They only had a couple incidents of it in the world, but it was basically like a coven. That's one of the brothers in Manosphere called it. It's like, but it was a network of female-led family structures, and a lot of it would be instituted by, like a group that had just come out of war. There was some situation where the men were gone, and and within a generation or two, the women would set up these female-led networks where all the major authorities came through them. Right. And so when I looked at it, the matripotestal meant that it was rooted through the mother, the grandmother. These were the central figures. I started referring to it as gynopotestal because for the Black community, it wasn't just limited to the mother. It was very much female centered.
Female. There you go.
So it wasn't limited to the mother. It was limited to the female dynamic. It began to be how I framed that whole kind of concept. And so, gynocracy, gynarchy, gynopotestal, those ideas came about as I was really kind of exploring the structure of the Black community and the ways that it functions. And by the time I get to CompuServe, what I'm really talking about are the men that are raised in these gynopotestal environments, just like I was, not only in my own family, but even in the academy. I mean, if I go back to my first book, I couldn't write more than a page on Black men. And I'd spent, I've been in higher education from 1992 to 2008. I could not talk about Black men. I met other Black men who could not talk about themselves. They didn't know how to. I even met gay brothers who were studying women's studies and gender studies, and they were only learning to talk about Black women, not even themselves. We didn't know how to do it. And so as I'm looking at it, I'm saying, well, in one end, I'm getting it from my family. In another end, I'm getting it from pop culture and media. Another wing, I'm getting it from education. Hell, the people I work with on an academic campus are employing it, even intellectually. Right? So I'm seeing mirrors of this in so many different areas that it started to really hit me. And it just kind of opened up the entire thing for me. So the whole notion of the CompuServe was really about, female servitude, in terms of men serving women. One of the ways I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, I ran across an article that talked about the average amount of time people have sex. And it said in the article, the average amount of time was somewhere between 5 and 15 minutes. And I fell out of my chair. And I think you remember this too, because when you come up in the 80s and 90s, and you come up listening to all that R&B, all those movies about seducing women.
There you go.
For us, if you just took sex, we didn't measure our performance based on how many minutes you could please a woman. We based it on how many hours.
There you go.
the seduction, the act, and that's so you have the seduction, you have the mental foreplay, you have the physical foreplay, you have the actual sexing, and then by the time brothers would talk about hours and how many hours they pleased women, did this and that, and so even in that regard, many of us, and this was actually reinforced by a piece that Tommy and Ebony Utley wrote. Called "She Touched Me," and in that there was one brother who was interviewed. As you know, the paper is about men who were sexually violated at a young age. That's the paper where they explore black males have the youngest sexual debut. We have sex at very young ages with older girls and women. And we've seen this reinforced by many different celebrities and so on and so forth. But there's one sentence in that piece where a man talks about how the very idea of sexual pleasure for him is shaped by the experience he had having sex for the first time before he was of age. Before he was of age, he couldn't even have a standard erection. But because of, and really what it meant was he was low-key traumatized. But we don't use the term trauma because we think of trauma as somebody has to be chasing you down the alley with a knife, raping you, for their trauma. But we found out in that paper, young boys have the same responses to being violated underage as girls. We just don't talk about it. So he talked about how his very sense, the wiring about how he processed his pleasure was shaped by these early experiences with older girls and women, right? And as I started to think about that, and I'm thinking about how we used to pride ourselves on how many hours you can go and how elaborate the seduction can be, and most importantly, how intense her response was to the things you were doing. As I started to put all those things together, I started to realize that we weren't developing these things really to enjoy sex. Learning how to enjoy the kind of ego response to her in what we were doing. You know what I mean? It was really about pleasing women, but it really wasn't about what we actually wanted to explore. So as I started to delve into that, the CompuServe comes out of this idea that our definition of manhood, our definition of self, is about how pleased women are with us. We get patted on the head. It was about female approval. That's really at the core of it. You have a generation or two of men raised primarily by women who learn to define their manhood based on the approval of women, sexual approval, maternal approval, approval at work, approval in your career. There was so many different aspects to female approval. That's where the whole concept came from. But none of those concepts, from gynopotestal to gynocracy to none of those were going to come out of feminist vocabulary.
No.
Because what they did is they crafted a vocabulary off of their experiences, and then they told us, well, if you're going to deal with gender, you have to deal with it the way we've constructed it. Never even asking the question if men have a different experience, altogether. Yeah. Right. This is where the whole notion in terms of sexual violation, when you talk about being made to penetrate, I mean, for the most part, that has to do with men. It's not limited to men. All lesbians, LGBT, so on and so. But for the most part, until you had made to penetrate, you didn't really understand how men could experience rape or can experience being raped by women. But that term had to be created. And once it was created as a concept, you started to see hundreds of thousands of reports. Well, it wasn't like men weren't experiencing those things, but we didn't have a vocabulary to frame it. So the FBI would literally leave these cases sitting on the table because they didn't have a classification. And up until 2012, rape was just defined by what men did to women. You know what I mean? And I'd see studies coming out in documentaries where they'd say 99% of rapes are committed by men, against women. But they didn't know how to classify all these cases. But once the vocabulary developed new classifications, then you started to see all of these cases that could now be put in proper order. And that's kind of what I wanted to do by contributing to this vocabulary that I'm seeing developed in the Academy with Black Male Studies, in the Manosphere, and I'm sure in other spaces. I'm trying to create new classifications, new modes by which men can express their experiences and begin to make sense and articulate what they're going through, because we haven't been able to do it.
And what's interesting?
We don't think it exists.
No, we don't. And what's interesting, and brothers, We've got 134 people on the live. Share, like, subscribe. We thank you for your support. Hit the super chat, Cash App, $BMI 3000, PayPal, Ronald B. Neal. I thank you all for your support. You know, when you broke down, like when you did your live on that Psychology Today article, the way you broke down the kind of exchange and the way in which men are used, all right, as just damn near, we can say utilities or disposable objects.
Yes.
It just, I mean, it exposed, there was really this deep underlying misandry that is there. You know what I'm saying? Because you really don't have any true deep value in those exchanges and everything. You know what I'm saying? It's like if she needs, as soon as she needs something done, she just calls this person to do this service, you know, for her or what have you, and then she, you know, discards him or what have you. You know what I mean? And until she needs him again,
right,
you know,
right.
And there's no real gratitude. There's no sentiment that is extended towards the work or labor that is done. You're just expected to do it. You're supposed to, it's like you're obligated to do it. You know what I mean? And it made me think of situations that I've been in, and one in particular where I knew I was involved with a woman who had that thing. She was a single mother. She had 3 children, and she had a list of men that she could call on to do various type of services. You know what I'm saying? That were kind of male specific. You know what I mean? Other than sex. Now, of course, sex was, you know, part of that, but other things. You know what I mean? And, you know, making the stuff around the house or whatever. And I remember, you know, getting into conflict with her because I recognized what she was doing. So much so that, you know, she had a son who had a biological father. And the relationship was so strained between the son, she and the biological father and the son, that when the son needed stuff done, she would outsource the work to other men, okay? As opposed to the biological father. She wouldn't bring the biological father in to do stuff that needed to be done for the son. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, it's so, you know, just to make it plain, she wanted me to do stuff that I felt that a biological father was supposed to be doing for a son. You know what I'm saying? Right. And so that's how the thing, that's how it works. And so when I didn't do it, she got mad and she got somebody else to do it. You know what I'm saying?
And that was your punishment. Right? She was punishing you by letting another man service her, which is supposed to make you feel like you're not good enough. You know.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, this thing is real, and I think you're giving Black men tools to help them interpret their experience and see what's going on, because this is common. This is not what you're talking about is pervasive. You know, these informal networks.
Yeah.
And that does say a lot about their, you know, their ingenuity, the women that is. They have these informal networks and these understandings about how they can utilize male labor, you understand, without compensating it in any kind of way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, it's something very real, and the language helps, you know. And I think I shared this story with you sometime. I was at a laundromat and washing my clothes, and there was a Black woman with her son, and they drove up, you know, to the laundromat, and he was probably he seemed to be maybe 12 or 11 years old. And this boy, he unloaded the car full of clothes, okay? She sat in the car, and he unloaded the clothes, and he got the detergent, he got the Clorox and all that kind of stuff, and he washed all the clothes. He put all the clothes in the machines and did all, and she just sat in the car.
Oh, wow.
The mama didn't do anything. So the boy, he just washed the clothes. I watched this black boy, 11 years old, wash loads and loads of clothes all by himself. You know,
Man,
now on one hand, it teaches him skills, right? But on the other hand, I mean, he's a little servant.
I mean, and that started with our generation. I mean, our generation were really the first generation of single mothers who were working, right? Working single mothers. So I had to learn. I was the oldest out of my, 2 siblings, me and my sister. And so I had to learn how to wash clothes. I had to learn how to cook. My mother retired from cooking when I was about 9. She just decided she didn't want to do it anymore. So I had to learn how to cook. I had to learn how to wash clothes and do it. So even to this day, the overwhelming majority of women that I may date or whatever, I can cook far better than they can. I can manage a house far better than they can because of that. But it also made it difficult for our generation, because once they started to blur the lines on gender roles, it was like, okay, well, what exactly do I get out of this? I'm supposed to, manage the house, and I'm supposed to be the prime, because they're mixing mythology with practicality, right? So, because my mother had us cooking and whatnot because she was working. Now, whether or not she would have done it anyway is a whole nother question, but that was part of the practicality. Now you have grown women and the men they're considering dating or being with, and they're expecting you on a practical end to take care of all of the domestic responsibilities. And then at the same time, this mythology where you're still supposed to be the primary breadwinner. You got to make 6 figures, you got to be over 6 feet tall, you got to be able to blow her back out, you got to be able to do all these things, and she may consider giving you respect if you're able to do it. And as I've had a number of women say to me, at the same time, as much as I may check all the boxes for being this mythical figure, I still got to cook and clean and take care. So there's this weird mix where women want this kind of one-way traditionalism, and this is feminism opened the door for this, where they can have all the benefits of the traditional idea, but then feminism allows them to demand in an almost mythic fashion all these extra things. And so they just reap the benefits of both their mythology and the traditional idea, and you got to pay on all the rest of the toll and the taxes for everything else. And you step back at a certain point and say, well, what exactly do I get out of this arrangement? And when you ask them that, they'll either just blankly look at you, or they'll say things like, well, you get to be with me. And so you just develop this kind of strange sense of, this doesn't really make any sense. You know what I mean? But and that's where we've gotten to in relationships. Men in particular, we're told that gender roles are bad. We're told that gender roles are oppressive, for women. But men are still held to traditional gender roles, and we've just had a number of mythical ideas associated with that further make it more difficult. But women are oppressed by gender roles, so men can't talk about gender roles in a problematic way, because that's the purview of women. But yet and still, men are experiencing this strange kind of set of expectations that really they don't make any sense. And this is what Rebecca Pope talked about when she talked about she stopped helping women, in terms of her dating, business she had. She said, the women coming in would be out of shape, would be, unseemly. They wouldn't even make much money sometimes, and they would demand Idris Elba. I mean, she said those women would look down their noses at her husband, and yet they were, just all over the place, and they never had what they were demanding from men. So this is the reality of what many of us are dealing with on the ground, and it doesn't make any sense. But I wanted to say a little something else on a previous topic you were bringing up in terms of vocabulary. You were also one of the people that gave me one of those mind blow moments. I don't know if you remember this, but you and I we were in a group chat, we were communicating, and you dropped a bomb. You mentioned the term heterophobia. The very first, and I had never heard that term before. And later on, I went to go research it, and I found that other people had used it, but I had never seen anyone use it in regard to Black men. And when I started to reflect on it, it literally took me a matter of seconds. When I started to think of, okay, Black heterophobia, fear of straight men, my first response, that feminist training in the back of my mind, well, nobody's afraid of straight men. And then I was like, wait a minute, Black men were lynched. What were they lynched for? Well, they were lynched because they were accused of raping white women. So were white women scared of gay men? No. They were explicitly afraid of straight black men. And then and then the more examples and examples started coming. I'm literally sitting there going, oh shit, Ronald, are you serious?
Yeah.
Now it got to a point where I went to one of the last NCBS conferences I went to. You know, I'm at a point now where people just avoid me. So I'm sitting in a little dinner plenary session at a table by myself. I am ostracized. Nobody talks to me. You know, the women don't want to have nothing to do with me, and the brothers don't want to be associated with what I'm talking about, even if they're sending me emails under the table saying, "Man, they don't want to be seen with me." And I don't care. I've always been a loner. I've always been a loner and an introvert anyway. So whatever. So I'm sitting there, and this brother walks up to me. And he strikes up a conversation. He tells me he likes what I presented, so on and so forth. And he said, I don't know where this men's study thing is going, but what do you think the potential of it is? I said, well, let me give you an example. I'm gonna give you a term that you've never heard of before. And I want you to tell me what you think. He said, okay, I'm ready. I said, black male heterophobia. And I just looked back down at my book. And I just said the term, looked down at my book. I just sit with it for a second. He sat there for 20 seconds. And then when I looked up again, his face was like, oh, shit. And he started to list all of the historical moments that now made sense in terms of a fear of black straight men. And it blew his mind. Now I said, now you asked about the potential for what, we didn't have a term at the time, but what we came to call black male studies. So the potential of it is you have concepts and terms that are out there that you're waiting for, but you don't know you're waiting for it. And so I have that on a slide, and and I have the actual quote you gave me, and I have after it Dr. Ronald Neal. You contributed to one of those moments, myself, several more than likely, but that's the one I remember most in this moment because I'd never heard of black male heterophobia before until you said it, and you said it in such an offhand way, but it was like, wait a minute, what? I've been taking gender studies for decades, and now you just try, but it made perfect sense once you actually sat with it. And I can tell you, I've had feminists literally get pissed at hearing me say the word, but brothers sitting in the same room in a presentation will go, oh, and it'll make perfect sense. So that's it. So I wanted to shout you out in terms of that because you're a part of this, dynamic, man. You've been opening this up.
I remember I put out on Facebook one time, and I had a colleague, queer colleague, she was like, there's no such thing as heterophobia. There's no such thing as heterophobia. She said that to me at school, and I'm like, yeah. I said, and she's not from here. She's not from the U.S. And I said, you don't know the history, our history here, and but and then like I said, I thought of it. I didn't know. See, I it just came to me as I was thinking about it and thinking about heterosexual men, straight men, and what was going on here right now, and then historically, and and I said this is a phobia. It's a phobia towards heterosexual black men. So it's black heterophobia. You know what I mean? And then later on, as I'm doing digging and doing research, I see that there's somebody who had used the term, a white woman, who was critical of feminism. A white woman named Daphne Patai, who was critical of sexual harassment, the sexual harassment industry. And she has a book that's called Heterophobia. And so and that was before, that was after I had thought of it. So I can't say I invented it or whatever. Now, blackness, now the black part, because what she did ain't got nothing to do with black people or black men.
Exactly.
And, so there's no applications there. Yeah. And she's talking about white women and stuff like that,
Right.
Yeah. So it's a unique application to our situation here in the U.S. and other places in the world.
But but there's so many, ways to apply it that we just haven't thought about. Like I did a show with BGS and Dennis Sperling a while ago, maybe last year, and we were talking about black men being bred, and I was talking about it in terms of black men being bred in families as CompuServes. But the conversation kind of went another direction, and we started talking about black men being appropriated from Africa and whatnot, and we started to talk about the early data on the people they were taking most were overwhelmingly black men. Now understand, I got 3 degrees in Africana studies. I had never actually heard in a class or a text that we were reading that the majority and the focus of early enslavement up until the early 1800s was primarily black men. Feminist professors taught slavery as a neck and neck, black men and women went through this together. They would not give room for that. You know what I mean? The only thing they gave room for one gender over another is when they talked about rape, or excuse me, RAPE. I apologize. But they only talked about it as something black women experience. They never talked about it. So there's this whole sexual violation component of slavery that they'll talk about in regard to women, but they'll ignore men. Other than that, everything about slavery has got to be equal. You got to have men and women on the screen. When you talk about it, it's all. But when you find out, and this was another aha moment, right? You know, that like I had with incarceration numbers, where I'm saying, wait a minute, I'm looking at these charts. I'm saying, the overwhelming focus of early enslavement was black men, and nobody in 3 different universities was willing to say that outright, because there's so much of this is catering to feminists that we can't have an honest explanation or exploration on the black male experience. When you take heterophobia, black male heterophobia, and you focus on the men that they were both identifying as their primary source of labor, but also terribly afraid of. What are they afraid of? They're afraid of an uprising where everything gets burned the hell down, where families wake up dead, the plantations are burned down. Well, who do you think they're afraid of? I hadn't thought about that. When I thought about the fear, that black men were having sex with white women. What is that? And that doesn't even deal with when we start talking about rape and lynching as a result. So when I looked at it historically, I said the further back I go, the more applicable I see this. And if you go back and bring it forward, you see it today, but it takes different forms. So y'all remember, it was a year or two ago. What's the black gentleman who was walking through the park in New York, and the white woman saw him and got and called the police and said he did something. I forget his name.
Christian Cooper.
Yeah. Right. Well, when you actually apply black male heterophobia to the dynamic, now this was the thing. I think if I remember correctly, he was a gay brother.
He's a gay guy.
But the perception of him wasn't that this is a gay individual who lives here. The perception of him was a dangerous black man that might be a threat. Right. So you still have the kind of appropriation of hetero ideas on LGBT black male bodies, right? But it was still applicable. So this concept that I heard you drop so casually, I'm like, there's so many applications for this, but so much of the academy is afraid to focus on black men that we just cater to whatever feminists say we can talk about, and that's it.
That's it. Yeah. And we have to, as we're doing now, I mean, you have to push back on it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, because the reality is that we're being killed, we're being slaughtered in the face of these malicious efforts towards concealing the true facts of our mortality and what has actually happened to us. Because you have a group of people who are threatened. It has the other part, right? They feel that their little capital, their little cultural capital that they have is going to be lost. They're going to lose it, all right, in the face of this black male heterosexual threat. You know what I mean? So it's like we've got white supremacy. We just got to say it. White supremacy very much embedded within this feminist ideology. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And playing out internally, towards black men. You know what I mean? And so I mean, my God, you have to push back on that. We've got 138 people in the chat. Share, like, and subscribe to the channel. Go ahead, sir. You were saying.
Well, no, I was going to say that was the importance of Tommy's kind of focus on the subculture of violence theory, where he actually tracked the white scholars that are producing this racist scholarship and the specific Black feminists that are literally quoting and citing that racist scholarship without critically analyzing it, without contextualizing it, without identifying where it came from. They wholly appropriated it. And then from there, this perspective of Black men as threat works its way through Africana studies. There was another piece he did. I think it was oh man, what was it? Black Not Morality. I think it was dealing. He was doing an assessment.
Black Studies Not Morality.
Black Studies Not Morality. Thank you. He was doing an assessment of Africana studies. Now, again, this is one of those aha moments for me. What I used to do, because I was teaching both at Fresno and then I was teaching at Claremont. So I would do that is I would literally drive. So mind you, I got a 5-year-old kid. So I have him with a babysitter. She'd pick him up after school. I would go drive down to LA, which is about 3.5, 4 hour drive, teach a 3-hour class, get back on the road at 10 o'clock at night to come back home. I'm getting at home at 3 or 4 in the morning, letting the babysitter go. And then at 8, I'm going to go teach at Fresno State. So I'm, going through this crazy schedule. And so I would have my iPhone read his paper while I'm driving. And I'm cussing the whole way because I've dedicated my life to Africana studies. And he's pointing out, and this is my words, not so much his, showing how feminism, in many ways, Black feminism has basically, Black feminism and intersectionality has taken over the field in a way that I witnessed, but I hadn't pulled together. And it just blew my mind. So, again, when you go back to that question you had about nationalism, that's one of those papers that really forced me to kind of question my identification, my intellectual moorings, because so much of it was based off of decades of training in Africana studies, but I'm not realizing that the field has been infiltrated, and it's been infiltrated by white supremacist ideas cloaked in Black feminist presentation and internalized by 2 generations of feminists and then repackaged and regurgitated to us in classrooms. And that's where we get to in this current moment, where you can't even have an idea regarding gender outside of a feminist, kind of framework. It doesn't, that's what it is. And so, those kind of things, just really kind of opened me up to how insidious a lot of this has become, and yet it's in the mainstream. So
it's the mainstream. Yeah. And speaking of Curry, so, Tommy Curry is the thing that brought us all together. You know what I'm saying? And the spirit of the times and everything. And I remember I met Tommy through social media and videos and all that. And later on, I got to meet him face to face. And like yourself, I brought him to my institution where he lectured and everything.
Right.
And his impact. And then in 2017, the Man Not drops, right? The Man Not drops. Now, I want you to go back, man. When the Man Not dropped, man, and you had that book in your hands and you read it as a Black man, as an intellectual, as a scholar, as you went through it, man, what was your reaction to it? What impact did the Man Not have on you as a Black man in light of all this stuff that, we deal with right now?
It was powerful. I mean, Tommy sent me a copy in Word before it was published. He sent me the whole book. And he was like, "Tell me what you think." And I started and couldn't stop. I couldn't stop. I was like, "What?" Because it's one of those things that you've been waiting your whole life for, but you didn't know you were waiting. And there was such overlap. I'm my background in Africana studies and in philosophy. That time, and so he's speaking directly to those areas. Those connecting fibers are right there. So Black men, Africana studies, philosophy, feminism, history. he's taking all these components that I have a foot in, but he's putting them together in a very unique way. And he's doing it in such an uncompromising way with such scholarship that it's you can't just easily dismiss it, because the evidence for where he's pulling his ideas from is right there. And then the fact that he got it published, and this is key. This is one of the reasons I tip my hat to Tommy and to you, because you can write the most powerful book ever, but the publishing system in and of itself is extremely elitist and alienating. It's an institution that has stifled many a voice. And so to be able to get that book out on a major academic press is unprecedented. Unprecedented.
Yes.
And we're starting to see more of it, but it's mind blowing, because I got to the point where I turned to blogs because the things that I wanted to say, you couldn't get through certain kinds of censors, and so I think when you talk about the man, it's not just what he wrote, it's that he got it published. It's that he was able to put those ideas out there, and he ended up creating a kind of intellectual umbrella, in the sense that it allowed people to come in and explore Black men in a way we could finally be free of these feminist kind of influences. And we had the room to explore under this umbrella, but the protective part of the umbrella also provided an ideological protection, meaning that if you called out something, if you were exploring something, and you get the traditional insults of being a misogynist or being this or that, you could actually defend what you were doing with the concepts that Tommy was introducing. So it was both protective, and it allowed brothers to explore questions from a new vantage point that we hadn't seen. So powerful.
And I would think, like yourself, it's hard in the publishing realm. I'm struggling right now. You talked about those days where you were writing 12 hours and 13-hour days, man. Before going live with you, man, I spent most of the day writing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm behind in getting this book that I've been working on for a number of years now, and but I'm intent. I'm going on leave next year. But it's not an easy thing, man. You know what I'm saying? To go down this road and to put out a perspective that is met with great hostility, a perspective, that you already built in the system. You already got guns, and you've got, weapons already aimed at you and stuff. You know what I'm saying? And to navigate it. And Tommy, Tommy just is so gifted in terms of, being a philosophical thinker and a writer. He's able to, the beauty about it is, to go through all that, feminist theory and queer theory and liberal theory, and turn it on his head.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I think it's good for the brothers to know, man, that you can turn things on their heads, guys.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? If you're dedicated and you're committed and everything, guys, it can be done. You just have to be disciplined and patient. But it's not an easy thing, man. It is not an easy thing. And I remember when you were writing, and I read one of your chapters. I remember it. I was like, man, you got to get this out here, man. And I was like, forget the American publishers, man. These international publishers, they don't have the kind of baggage that we have, And Tommy kind of talked about that during that Twitter space, about the European scene, and they're not as provincial as Americans are. But at any rate, it's not an easy thing, man. It's not an easy thing, man. And like yourself, man, there was the book that we were waiting for, and I will say this over and over again. That was The Man Not is a book that we were supposed to have had 20 years ago. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
We were supposed to have that book. Everything cool?
My computer is tripping. I'm not sure what's going on with it.
Okay.
actually never seen this happen before. All my screens went out. Can you see me at all?
I can see you.
Okay.
You
This is
guys in the
weird.
chat, can you guys still see us? If you can see us in the chat, guys, say just put one in the chat. If you can see us, we're coming through to you. We're coming through.
This is really weird. My computer just completely just turned off. Like all my monitors are blacked out. I don't know what's going on.
Just
But
put one in the chat. Put one in the chat, brothers. If you all can.
Okay.
If
Well,
you all can.
we can keep going till the wheels
Yeah, I
fall
can
off.
see you. I can see you, man. I can see you. I can see you. I can see you. So don't worry about it. I can see you. I can see you. I can see you. I can see you, man.
Okay.
I can see you. BGS, I got you a wrench under Black Gnostic. BGS, I got you a wrench. Tim Howard, I got you a wrench. Look under Black Gnostic. All right, they can see me. Okay, they can see us. They can see us. All right, brothers. Thank you, brothers. Don't worry about it, man. We straight. We're good to go.
I don't know what this is.
But yeah, man. Tommy. Yeah, man. Tommy. Open things up, for us, and the beautiful thing about The Man Not Man is it's once a book like that is out there, man, it is out there, man. I mean, you can't take it back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can't like you can't do what the Nazis try to do with books in Germany and stuff like that. Written by Jews and all that kind of stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's just out there, and the world has to deal with it. Everybody sees us, man. Everybody sees us.
Okay.
Let's start. I know I'm gonna wrap up. We've been here, man, for 2 hours, man. But I just want to kind of wrap things up, man, by talking about the Institute of Black Masculine Studies, and just say a little something, man, about where you want to see the Institute going, and its growth and everything like that, and what maybe just a little bit about how first first it was the honor support, and then the Institute for Black Masculine Studies, man. So man, speak to us about that. Yeah.
Well, I started the Institute for Black Male Studies in November of 2020. And I actually did a little poll. BGS, kind of helped with the poll, just to kind of get a feel for whether or not that's something that people would support. I got some positive feedback, so I set it up primarily as a space to do classes, because unless you're either in Edinburgh with Dr. Curry, there's really no place you can take a Black Male Studies course. Now you can, or I should say, you can't get a degree in it. If you find an individual scholar like yourself, Dr. William Smith, myself, and you go to the campuses that we're at, you can have a Black Male Studies course. But that's kind of the best you can do. And I wanted to set the Institute up so anybody could access it, and they could actually get used to the concepts, the publications, and get a chance to engage the field, because we knew there was going to be a lot of resistance at many universities for Black Male Studies, especially when you talk about the kind of spaces we're looking at. When you look at the Black Academy, so much of it is led by feminism, that the very idea of Black Male Studies is considered offensive to many. They don't even know what it is. So I set up the Institute because I was hoping that we could actually explore some ideas, and it could be easily accessible for anybody. And where I'm considering taking it now is developing some online conferences through the Institute, where brothers like yourself can actually come present and be able to do so full-throatedly about the topics that you're interested in, and you don't got to filter it out of concern for your audience. I want you to talk to a Black Male Studies audience. I'm also contemplating doing a journal, not only a blog, a journal, and even setting up a press where we can actually publish our own books. That's one of the things we're always concerned about. As soon as you write something and you send it off to a publisher, it's like, how's this going to go? And so I'm thinking of, setting it up as a press to not only, put out my own books, but also to welcome, brothers who are doing work, and they don't want to necessarily filter our language. I mean, sometimes, I understand, you got to speak, the proper vernacular where you are. It's, there are different moods and tones for whatever you're doing, but there's sometimes you just got to be raw and straight up. And for black people, there's not a lot of places for that.
No,
So,
no. And what's so interesting? When I think about your institute, man, Vincent Harding, the late Vincent Harding, he started the institute back in the 70s, called the Institute for the Black World. And the Institute for the Black World was supposed to be a place to study Black people in Atlanta. You know what I mean? And it had a lot of promise. It had a short history, it was short-lived. And but I remember when it was born, and there's still some stuff written about it. And that was the whole point of the Institute of the Black World. It was supposed to be independent of universities and all of that. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And to create a different public for Black people. You know what I mean? And we with Gigi a couple of weeks ago talking about the 70s and Black nationalism and the spirit of the times. You know what I mean? And so here we are, man. You got a digital think tank, man. This is a digital think tank, a digital space.
Yeah.
Unprecedented. Not even, you mentioned his name before, not even Mark Anthony Neely has his thing at Duke and everything. But it nowhere near in terms of vision, because he mainly does Black women oriented stuff and art and all that kind of stuff, and that's his thing. But a digital space, and I think that, and for me, I just want to say, man, I think that is the most I guess magnanimous aspect of this moment right now, man. You know what I'm saying? Because we have these tools, and you have this digital archive, and this stuff is going to be around forever, man. And it's independent. It's independent, right? So you're not you don't have a physical space where you're having to raise money, run all over the country begging white people for money. You know what I'm saying? White liberals and everybody else, and rich white people and stuff like that, man. So that's a beautiful thing. And
it's not commercially funded. I literally cover this myself. It comes the closest I could say is it comes out of the donations that come to the Institute from, say, YouTube or Patreon. Between that and my pocket, that's what funds the Institute. So there's no commercial funding. It's not determined by white administrators. It isn't even filtered through Fresno State. It's completely independent, and I want that to be on the table, because there's a lot of brothers that would love to publish something and have something to say, but they're not in a position to do it, and they're often not in a position to get what they want to say actually out there in terms of anything published. So there's a lot of possibility with it. I'm still growing it, still trying to decide what direction to take it in, but that's what I'm thinking of. And if I can continue to get dialogue from brothers like yourself, Gigi, and anyone else that may have an idea to contribute, I would appreciate it.
Absolutely. You got my support on that. There's so much that is there, and I just want to we will wrap up, man. And I know you've done a number of interviews. You've interviewed Obsidian, Mumia Ali, interviewed Angry Man, O'Shea Duke Jackson. You've interviewed him. You've interviewed Kevin Samuels. You know what I mean? And so you've got a multifaceted approach to Black men, which is so great. You're dealing with the living, those of us who are alive, as well as the stuff in the past and everything. There, man. And I just want to end on this, man. So how does it feel knowing that you got, the most popular man, black man in social media, quoting you, the most popular black man in social media with the 1.3 million subscribers. Every time I look up, this man is using some concept or some idea or some reference from Dr. Hasan Johnson. And y'all know who I'm talking about, none other than Kevin Samuels. Kevin Samuels is an avid watcher of the Onyx Report. And you can hear the influence of the Onyx Report on his platform, man. What you got to say about that, bro?
Honestly, man, there's I think in some amongst certain people there's a serious break between what black men are starting to do in the academy and the manosphere. And I think under the table they inform each other, but on top of the table people don't want to associate the two. And to me, I look at it like, look, I've been waiting I've never in my entire life have I seen black men speaking up the way I am now. Never. I never thought it would happen. And if it did, I didn't think it would happen during my lifetime.
Yeah.
So for me to see it and not make these connections, it doesn't make sense to me, because the reality is feminists are describing, black male studies in the manosphere the same way, even though, they have some critical differences here and there. The point of the matter is, as far as they're concerned, because black men are the ones talking, it's inherently misogynist, sexist, and everything else you typically hear in terms of feminist shaming. And I'm saying we got to get past what other people are saying and actually get to the ideas that are coming from black men that inform black male life. You got to get to the core of it. So that's why you'll see a slew of academics that have been interviewed on the Institute channel, and a number of brothers from the manosphere, because it's the core ideas. And I'm principally interviewing men who, or I should say, black male advocates whose work deals with black males unapologetically. Yeah. I'm not just going around interviewing people at random. It's got to be people that are dealing with black men. So I got to get that brother, Dr. Ronald Neal.
Yeah. You got me,
I got to get him in there.
I've been slow dragging on that. We're going to do that. We're going to make that happen.
I got to get that brother in there, man. But
you got to do it now.
I mean, at the end of the day, man, it's really just about showcasing black, brothers who are doing, or really anybody who's doing work that uplifts black men and boys. I want to showcase them. I want to foreground them. I want to kind of frame what contributions they're making to black male studies, because I think it needs to be chronicled. It needs to be archived. It needs to be put somewhere where it's easily accessible to everybody, where we can actually see what these ideas are and how they're being made in real time, because they're changing lives. Look, man, a brother this morning on Twitter reached out to me because he was about to commit suicide. I've never met this brother. I've never even communicated with this brother on Twitter before. Out of nowhere, he just reached out and said, "Doc, I appreciate what you do. I'm about to end it." And, we ended up having a dialogue offline, and he sought some help, and he said he's talking to some people, but he was ready. And we know from the data, men in particular across race, women attempt suicide in much higher numbers than men. Men complete suicide in much higher numbers than women. So in other words, we don't play around. When a brother's reached the point where he's ready to do it, you either got to get to him quick, or it's often going to be a wrap, because we don't toy with this stuff. If a brother said he's going to do something to himself, take that seriously. But he came to me because of these dialogues that we're having, and the dialogues that we're having gave him hope. And so we got to support each other. We got to reach out to each other. And this is not the first time. I talk about this a lot because our brothers reach out to me a lot.
I know.
They reach out a lot, because nobody's listening to them.
Oh, no one is listening.
And nobody's explaining what they're going. So these brothers will reach out and say, you know what? I now can articulate to my wife why I'm at this place, because, the verbiage came from these, scholars and these content creators who are teaching me how to explain the black male experience. You know what I mean? So they have something they're holding on to because now they're finally able to start hearing something that explains why they feel like how they feel, why they've been treated the way they've been treated. You know what I mean? Brothers taken for granted who are holding down families, but treated like nothing more than an appliance, even though the emotional work that they're putting out there, the emotional labor that they're giving to family is appreciated, needed. Well, I shouldn't say appreciated. It's needed, it's received, but it's treated like this is just what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
No acknowledgement of their humanity, no acknowledgement of their sacrifices. This is why these spaces are so important, because we can now speak, brothers can now say, no, this is what's going on. This is what I need. Be it an intimate relationship, hell, it can even be a business relationship, but us being able to articulate what it is that we're going through and what we need, that has to happen. And it's a life death issue. It can be a life death issue.
It is. It is. It is. It is. And you are absolutely right, man. We are touching lives. I've got those same messages too from brothers who suicidal, who needed resources, who needed insight on where to go and everything, and therapists and all of that. And no one else is doing it. Doing that. You know what I mean? And so we are. I mean, our work is truly unprecedented, man. You know what I mean? And we are. I mean, this is just a completely different paradigm. It's pushed us beyond how we were trained. And pushing us in new directions. And oh my! And just think about this, man. It's really, and I know. I mean, you see this. It pushes us to really rethink our entire history and existence as Black men, as Black people in this country, man. I'm looking. I don't know about you. I suspect it's true for you, but man, I'm looking at us differently, man. I'm looking at our whole. You talk about slavery, and the fact, it was here in America, but also in the Caribbean. In the slave trade, it was deliberate in putting more males in those environments than females. You know what I mean? I mean, I was reading somewhere about Barbados, man, where there were so many men in Barbados. You know what I'm saying? That the slaveholders, they really got anxious. You know what I'm saying? Because those men, they were men, even though they were slaves, but they were still men. You know what I'm saying? They were really concerned about insurrections and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And
even in Brazil, you had places where white slave owners had to negotiate with the enslaved that they wanted to sell, because some of those groups had gotten so powerful. They were also practicing, Santeria, or not Santeria. I'm sorry. What is it? No. I'm actually not. I didn't mean to mention the religion. I was talking more about the martial art. What is it? What's the martial art?
Brazilian jiu-jitsu? Was that
predated that. It's oh my goodness, it comes out of Angola. They translated it into Brazil in terms of the style, a lot of movement. How am I blanking on the name of this martial art? Y'all know what I'm talking about. What is the martial art coming out of Brazil?
Is it Capoeira?
Capoeira. Thank you.
Capoeira.
I don't know why I blanked on that, but I had a senior.
Brothers got it.
But you had groups that were practicing capoeira so strong that you actually had to have white Brazilian slave owners negotiate with them in order to continue to sell them and move them out. So this narrative we got about just servility or whatever, there were a lot of nuances to that, and the biggest fear they had on a consistent basis was that these groups were going to rise up, and in many instances they did, on a variety of levels, from breaking their tools and work stoppages to all out cutting throats in the middle of the night. You had a plethora of examples, but a lot of it was led by Black men, and you can't say that today without being framed as a misogynist. That's the interesting thing. You actually have to shift the history to suit the sensibility of feminists who don't want to hear about what men contributed. I mean, hell, I had feminists attacking me when I did a review of Nate Parker's Birth of a Nation, and they were upset because the film focused on Nat Turner. They wanted to call it the regional uprising. They literally wanted to remove Nat Turner from his own rebellion because he was a black man. Black feminists. They wanted to change on, and they were upset that in the film they didn't show as many women fighting as men. But if you read the records of who was actually lynched in response to the uprising, there was one woman and a long list of men. But they don't want to give that up, even if it's historically accurate, because for them everything has to be either black women led or equal in some sense. So we got to ignore any of the history that doesn't reflect those sensibilities. Ridiculous.
So you guys, you see what we're up against, guys. We're up against people who are willing to revise history and make up stuff, make a mythological narrative. If they have their brothers, there would be no black men in our history, period. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's crazy. And we're gonna wrap up, man. There was a history that came out recently from some professors out of Rutgers called a Black Woman's History of the United States. And it was supposed to be like, Howard Zinn did, a people's history of the United States. And then there was Roxanne Ortiz. She did an indigenous people's history of the United States. They've got Hispanic history of the United States. But this is a Black woman's history of the United States. Those other histories are not gender specific. Okay. Zinn's history of a people's history is not gender specific. The woman who did the book on Native Americans, indigenous people, that's not gender specific. And the ones on Latinos is not gender specific. But the Black woman's history is gender specific. You know what I'm saying? This is the kind of stuff we're dealing with, man. This is the crazy stuff that we're dealing with. But anyway, Doc, we're gonna wrap this up, man. I'm so glad that we had this conversation, man. This was a long time coming. I've been wanting to do this for the longest, man. You've been so generous to me, and man, you give me over 2 hours of your time, man, just talking. You got the brothers in the chat. I appreciate everybody that's here, man. And our conversation is ongoing, man. We brothers until the end, man. Until the caskets drop. You know what I'm saying? and I'm excited about where this thing is going, man, and what we're doing, because I really believe, man, that we are making history, man. We are part of this thing, and I just look forward to the next chapter. And I know that. And you know this, man. There are always challenges and obstacles and hurdles, and there are darts and arrows and all that kind of stuff. But it goes with the territory. You know what I'm saying? It goes with the territory. It is what it is, man. But I appreciate you, man. And man, any last word before we sign out, man? Any last words to the brothers?
I might have to take that Dr. Neil class on how to navigate Brazil. That's the class I'm interested in taking. That's the one I'm thinking about. But nah, man, at the end of the day, man, I appreciate you. I love the work you're doing here, man. If there's anything I can do to support, we definitely want to build your channel. More people need to be hearing from you. So, thank you for having me up today, and shout out to all the brothers in the chat who've been, engaging. Much appreciation. Make sure y'all hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe, support Dr. Neil's channel. Let's build it out. We need to get these numbers up for him.
Get him up, guys. Cool. Well, listen, guys, it's been a good Friday night, and I'm glad that you all were here with us, man. And of course, more shows are on the way, and I'm catching up with Dr. J. Dr. J is, he's out there, in Star Wars world and everything with all the effects and all the George Lucas stuff. I'm catching up. I'm going to be, doing my Matrix stuff real soon. So it takes a little time. You know what I mean? So it's a little slow with the tech when it's coming.
Hey, man.
But anyway, you guys enjoy the rest of your your Friday night and your weekend, and I will see you guys on next live. And you take care, Dr. J, and you enjoy your Friday night and your weekend, man. And I'll catch up with you later, man.
All right, man. You enjoy your night, brother. Appreciate you having me, man.
All right. Peace out, brothers.